neighbor, welcome to ARTV. I'm John, and the pop-punk band BLINK-182 have consistently been one of my favorites since the early 2000s. I've kind of been binging through the discography again recently, and I realized that my favorite Blink songs have changed pretty significantly in the past few years. I put out my top 10 list originally in early 2016, and after rewatching that, holy mother of God, I really got better at this whole YouTube thing, and I had to redo the video ASAP. Instead of just a top 10, I'm going to be revealing my top 20 favorite Blink-182 songs because number 1, a top 10 wouldn't do it justice, and number 2, a top 20 just makes sense because it's 2020 and I've got to keep up the spirit of the Roaring 20s even if we're off to a horrible start. This countdown will touch on all corners of the discography, and unlike last time, I haven't accidentally forgotten a key song that will throw off the entire list. All of my honorable mentions are in the description. Sorry in advance, I know there's like a fat stack of them down there. And before we get started, please take a split second to click the like button for me, and if you end up enjoying what you see and how I present the countdown, then share it out with a friend, maybe a community that you're a part of, and maybe even consider supporting my content on Patreon at the top link down below. From its rather bizarre chopped guitars and wild drums courtesy of beatmaster Travis Barker, we've got one of Blink's most underrated songs from the Untitled album. Tom's eerie vocal delivery with Mark talking behind him acting as backing vocals in the verses is really effective, and when you add in that stern hook that really brings it all together, you've got a blistering diamond on your hands that always manages to blow me away every time I fire it up. This was the moment I realized Matt Skiba truly had potential in Blink. Although many of the other tracks on California completely misused his talents, the hate scene for Skiba is kind of unreal. I know he doesn't sound that great live or anything these days, but you do realize that this isn't just some rando off the streets, right?
You're still a rando. You know what I'm saying? Like, compared to the rest of the bros, you're the noob. You're the rando bro. I'm sorry to say it, but you're random.
The intro reminds me a little bit of the Neighborhoods era with the light electronics and Mark's moody bass, and once the track hits full stride, I'm left wondering why this wasn't one of the most celebrated songs on the album. Motivations for writing this tragic song stemmed from the tragic Thousand Oaks shooting in 2018, along with the other senseless acts of violence that impacted Mark Hoppus and the other members of the band. Heaven was a major highlight from this very modern-sounding Blink album, choosing not to clip the wings, but instead to pair them up with halos and shoot for the stratosphere. Tom lays down a super memorable riff to open things, and with Enema being Travis's first album since joining, he kills it with some thunderous drumming that helps this song feel even more well-rounded. Whiny lyrics from Mark about wanting to be with a girl he can't have, a record label exec to be specific, never sounded so good. It's just a perfect summer nostalgia song that would probably sound even better blasting from some boat speakers for obvious reasons. Perhaps not all recall that little EP Dogs Eating Dogs that dropped without much warning at the end of 2012, but I do, and to this day, I don't think there's an even remotely bad song on it. One of my top tier favorites is of course Boxing Day, a fantastic well-written acoustic track that saw them branching out and finding new ways to stretch their creativity. Getting dumped on the day after Christmas probably isn't anyone's ideal relationship, but Tom and Mark do such a great job at hammering out the heartbreak, while Travis Barker holds it down with an exceptional drum performance that proves how easily he can flip that little switch in his head and mold his playing style to something more tempered and melancholy.
A day late. Short, I'm writing the report on losing and failing.
From the depression of dumpage on the last pick to even more dumpage set to a snazzy riff on one of the band's most celebrated anthems, we can hopefully all agree on one thing. Getting dumped was one of the keys to Blink-182's master plan for world domination. Love Story by Taylor Swift? Never heard of it. Give me the breakup jams, please. Something about Mark just feels unhinged, like flying off the rails in the best meltdown possible over the course of 3 fast-paced, punk-laced minutes. Their sound was a lot more raw in those days, and while some will never get over the fact that Dude Ranch is never coming back, I'm clearly on board for both sides of the fence. When I was writing out this list, I was sitting there thinking to myself, am I really putting the less than 2-minute intro track from California in my top 20? But the more I listened to the song, I felt more and more compelled to actually include it because it genuinely is one of my favorite BLINK-182 songs. Mark Hoppus opens the track by venting his frustration with anxiety and depression, looking the uphill battle dead in the eye against a stern but minimal bass intro before Travis cranks the drum insanity up to 11. I love that we can hear him yell, "ah!" after his little drum solo because he thought he fucked up, but it turns out he nailed it, and his drumming along with the fast spurts of guitar energy keep you on the edge of your seat and shouting along. Matt carried his share of the weight too, lining up with Mark seamlessly during the verse, and then launching into that unforgettable hook with the commanding vocal prowess that proves how important his role in the band can be.
I am a child inside, back up and give me some room. I'm just a bastard child, don't let it go to your head.
Dare I say it, this is one of the definitive BLINK-182 riffs right here, and it is so unbelievably slept on. I'm beating a dead horse at this point by telling you how much I love Neighborhoods, so I'm resorting to track-by-track promotions apparently. But hey, Natives coming right out of the also amazing, but not quite in my top 20 Ghosts on the Dance Floor is one of the most unique marks from an already electrifying release. The drum and riff structure feels a bit like a raft bouncing around in the ocean's waves. Battered and bruised, but determined enough to keep going in the right direction. I really appreciate that Natives is one of the most collaborative cuts on the album since you can really feel the passion of all three members. Much of Neighborhoods was actually written in separate studios at the insistence of Tom DeLonge for whatever reason, but this was an exception to the rule that got them in there together to really crank out a massive tune that touched on their place in the world of punk rock. Reliving the traumatic nightmares of your childhood experiences is no easy task, but what set the Untitled album apart from the pop-punk band's early triumphs was the mature songwriting and the sonic experimentation they faced head-on, with the short burst of anger and anxiety, Go, being a perfect example of why this direction works so well for them. Beyond the lyrics, I really just dig the smashing inertia this song has, which is quite fitting considering the song is called Go. Tom shouts of the word as Mark drives home that hook sounds like ecstasy on the ears. Damn, what a flawless track. I mean, I wish it were a bit longer, but from the loudmouth guitars and back again, there's not a single thing that I would realistically change. The songs that can make you feel so many things simultaneously are the special ones you never forget. Lifted from the Dogs Eating Dogs EP, I present When I Was Young at number 11. Hope, nostalgia, guilt, adventure, depression, they're all touched on here, and one of the biggest takeaways I can pass on to you is that this song is life. It's all of those things and more in a bottle, and it's gonna hit you differently depending on your own experiences. Things get better, things get worse. There's always a balance, I guess. I think the same thing could be said for BLINK-182 as a band, and for some, that line in the chorus, "It's the worst damn day of my life," probably applies to the day that they found out Tom was no longer in BLINK-182. And you know what? I get it. I miss that man's creative juices in the group, and with this EP being the swan song for him and the band, at least for now, this one hits that much harder. This is one of the only placements that hasn't changed at all from my original top 10, and at number 10, we have their classic single, I Miss You. I'll never get over the dark melancholy and the perfect sad boy lyrics they offer up. It's a modern emo classic that you'll one day pass on to your kids, and we'll all have a laugh at Tom's amazing, albeit exaggerated voice of the iconic line, "Don't waste your time on me, you're already the voice inside my head." Need further proof that Matt Skiba can fit nicely into this whole BLINK-182 thing? Have a go with his best song since joining the band, No Heart to Speak Of. This is the first track we've really seen that mainly puts him in the driver's seat alone, and by that, I mean he leads the first verse and the choruses, and that outstanding yell leading back into the final hook. Hey, Mark brings a lot to the table on the second verse too, but really most of the song's success can be attributed to Matt's rousing vocal show. Playing off of the skittering drums and delicate guitars and even some of the haunting pianos, there's a true sense of abandonment felt here as he guts this from the inside out.
My girlfriend takes me home and I'm too drunk to drive.
Summertime sadness? Here's the cure for that story of a lonely guy in your life that might actually just be you. Keep putting yourself out there. Maybe you'll find your Josie out there somewhere that'll inspire you to write a killer punk love song like this. The riffs are delectable in the way that they just make you have an instant reaction to the music. You can't sit still while listening. You'll either drum along to Scott Rayner's splintering performance on the nearest household object, or you'll break out that true shred air guitar as you find your mood instantly boosted.
I had that dream about you again, where I wait outside.
Using a roller coaster ride to describe a tumultuous relationship might feel overcooked like a flaming turkey coming out of the oven on Thanksgiving modern day, but lest we forget some of the grandfathers of amusement park metaphors giving this to us in the very early 2000s. This has always been one of the best songs on Take Off Your Pants and Jackets, and one of my personal favorites when it comes to songs sung entirely by Mark. There's an instant feeling of pop-punk energy from the danceable guitar and drum work in the intro to the steady bass groove held throughout the verses. The build-up to the hook is overdramatic in a way that screams pure angst, but I wouldn't have it any other way. This remains one of the most fun jams they've ever made, and a deep cut worth keeping in rotation.
And that's about the time she walked away from me. Nobody likes you when you're 23.
Let's just allow the song to speak for itself. This is the definition of a pop-punk classic. There's still millions of people that remember the song fondly and quote some of the legendary lines all the time to this day. You're probably still seeing tons of people posting "Nobody likes you when you're 23" on their 23rd birthday.
I felt a stutter and a waver, cutting like a razor.
Sneaking into the top 5, I have Snake Charmer from the deluxe edition of Neighborhoods. Imagine the perfect storm that not only gives you a heavy dose of Tom's other band Angels and Airwaves, but a tidal wave of euphoria that feels like the perfect dark evolution this band should have kept gunning for. This mysterious thriller sees some excellent, descriptive songwriting that really lets your mind's eye wander into the depths of the great unknown. It seems to be about sexuality and the influence that women have over men when it comes to sex, brimming with biblical references to the Garden of Eden and even more that just roll out like poetry. One final thing I wanted to mention with this track is that after that final hook rolls in where we get those luminous backing vocals that sound a lot different, there's a new layer to the song, we get Travis synchronizing perfectly with the programming here, laying down some nasty beats, in a moment that kind of feels like a time lapse of an ice sculpture refreezing. I know that probably doesn't make much sense unless you've heard the song a lot, but if it does, then let me know.
It's no use if we're fucked up, you're to blame.
Anthem Part 2 was the sequel to the closing song on Enema of the State, and proved to the outcast kids that change or discontentment with authority didn't have to be some hard-to-understand 8-page essay on the government. It could hit with a line as simple as, "If we're fucked up, you're to blame," which basically drops the mic and walks away as the older generations continue to repeat their mistakes. There's a reckless feeling of excitement that greets me every time I go back, and that's a good nostalgic feeling I miss having around. Reconnect with an old friend, stand up for yourself, rock out and dance around the deck naked and own it! Blink outdid themselves with this explosive moment, and I definitely see this being passed on to future generations. Up next, for songs that would never be accepted in our modern landscape, we have the hilarious ripper Dysentery Gary. The colorful language and crude humor is a part of Blink-182's legacy that some like to comb right on over, but how could we forget a takedown like this? Gary is the embodiment of every douchebag that gets picked over you. The guy that gets the girl while you're at home jerking off and crying into a pillowcase about how alone you are. I love the crass one-liners that clearly aren't meant to be taken too seriously, but the way this song was crafted musically is also super clutch. Untitled era Blink are fucking golden. Can we all just agree that this was Blink-182 firing on all cylinders at probably their most creative point ever? Without a doubt, this is so close to topping my list, with it obviously being my favorite on this album. There's just so many little things that make it so damn special that it can be kinda hard to put into words. I love that it's kicked off by a jolting drum line, and that we get such a tilted, jagged riff that carves this song up like a jack-o'-lantern. The ferocious chemistry lasts through some insanely good tempo changes, also highlighting the vocal trade-offs back and forth between Mark and Tom that remind me of what made this band so special in the first place. Not to mention the lyrics dive into the deep end and really tackle some hard-hitting issues surrounding the anxieties of life. In particular, Mark's delivery towards the end of this song in that one line, "You're cold with disappointment while I'm drowning in the next room." Chills, man. Chills.
We can't depend on your excuses, 'cause in the end, it's useless. You can only lean on me for so long.
Never Never Again to Be Forgotten, we have the original King of the Weekend, Man Overboard, from their live album soundtrack, The Mark, Tom, and Travis Show, grabbing the coveted #1 spot on the countdown. This treasure is legendary. It soundtracks some of my best moments and summers and lingers in the back of my head all the time, even 20 years later. Scott Raynor got booted from Blink for his out-of-control drinking problem, and it's pretty clearly addressed in the lyrics, but honestly, I never really cared what the song was about. It's a bangin' tune that literally never stops bringing it ever. Like, there are no points in the song to zone out or just lose focus. It's a tight-knit dragon's breath that literally never stops shooting fire from its mouth. The bass intro is, I'm gonna have to say it, iconic, and after all that build-up teasing throughout Mark and Tom's first parts, we get a domineering guitar riff that's quite clearly my favorite thing that Blink have ever done. To me, this has always felt like a toxin cleanse after weeding out the sneaky friends out of your life, an anthem for moving the hell on and having fun with it in the process. Many things in life have definitely changed, but my love for this song is definitely not one of them. Now that we've made it to the end of the video, really the only thing left for you to do is slap that mother effing like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. For those of you who would like to get a little bit more personal and go above and beyond, then hit my my Patreon at the top link in the description down below. That would be very scary if I was running one of those. I won't do that. Patreon down below, another Blink video right over here, in fact the whole playlist of them, or another recent top 10 countdown right over here. All of my socials, including Patreon, can be found in the description, and I'll see you soon for more on ARTV.